Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. In this podcast interview, we have Darrell from Georgia. He had a Bigfoot encounter in Willow Springs, Missouri, near the Twain National Forest. He described seeing a large bipedal creature one night, and the thought of it has never left his mind. Darrell has also had some strange experiences in Georgia when he was fishing. He said the activity was very unusual, and he does not think it was due to wildlife or natural occurrences. Sometimes in life, you can't really figure out what happened, and you just have to believe there are unknown answers to what you experienced. If you enjoy listening to Sasquatch Theory, please like and subscribe to the channel, and if you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me here on Sasquatch Theory, feel free to get in touch at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. Alright guys, let's dive into our next Bigfoot encounter from Willow Springs, Missouri, and the state of Georgia. Hey Darrell, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you so much for asking. Darrell, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences from the very beginning, please.
All right. Well, I'm currently in southeast Georgia, but I was born in southern Missouri in the early 70s and lived there until I was 12 years old. And originally, when I was very young, we lived in a small town called Kabul, which is in the Ozarks. And then when I was, I guess it was about 6 or 7, we moved in with my grandparents in Willow Springs for a while, my mother and I. And we lived with them until I was 12 years old when she remarried and moved to southeast Georgia. And when we lived there in Willow Springs, of course, Willow Springs itself is just outside the Mark Twain National Forest. And there's quite a few camping areas there. And one of the camping areas has a small lake called Noblet Lake. Very beautiful natural area there. I don't know if you've ever been to it or not, but I highly recommend it unless it's changed. It was quite beautiful when I was going there when I was younger. And there's a little small dam, and we used to like to go fishing in the lake or just below the dam in Noblet Creek itself. And I don't remember the exact year. I would have been about 10 or 11 when this happened. My birthday is late in May, and I had just gotten a new Daiwa rod and reel, and I was extremely proud of it because I had broken my rod and reel the previous summer, and I was really looking forward to going fishing with this. So right at the end of May, I'd gotten that. So this would have been early June. Don't know the exact day. But roughly early 1980s, and we drove over to Noblet Lake and went fishing for the afternoon. And the drive over there and the drive back, of course, is through a lot of the Mark Twain National Forest, but there's some small farms and homesteads and stuff along the way, especially as you get closer to Willow Springs. And we drove over there that day and fished, and we were fishing below the dam, and there's some really flat rocks that are below the dam. And I tell this part simply to say that I'd gotten out on some of these rocks so I could cast out a little bit further into the stream. And my grandparents had gone, and my mother had gone, and myself. And I was out there doing that, and turned around to find a very large water moccasin coming up on the rock with me. And so my grandmother, who was closest to me, came over there with her walking cane and shooed it off. But this kind of freaked my mother out a little bit, and she said, it's time to go. And it was a lot earlier than we would normally leave because we'd normally stay till nearly dark. And so anyway, we started packing up and decided to leave. And even though I wasn't ready to go because we were catching fish, but we got in the car and headed back home. So normally riding back from Noblet Lake to our home would have been in the dark, but this day it was still daylight. And although it was getting close to dark, and we were riding back, and I was looking at the trees and watching for animals and stuff, as I often did on the ride. And essentially, as we got closer, to Willow Springs, we kind of come out of the Mark Twain National Forest and start seeing some of those small farms and homesteads. And we're driving, and it's right at dusk, and I'm seated behind my mother who was driving, and my grandparents were on the passenger side of the car. And I'm looking out the window, and we drive by a small farm. It was maybe about 50 yards off the road, and there was an equipment shed or a barn or something there, and it had what appeared to me to be a chicken coop next to it. It was a small chicken house surrounded by pretty high chicken wire. It looked like maybe, like 2 or 3 strands of chicken wire wrapped around a fence going around it. And near it, 5 or 6 feet from it, was a very large animal. And it was very out of the ordinary. I'd seen a couple bears before at distance, black bears, and this one was standing upright, and it was solid black, and it was very broad, and from what I could tell, it was very tall. And looking back at it now, I would say it's at least twice as tall as what a normal black bear standing up would look like. So I was just fascinated by it. I followed it with my eyes and turned my head just so I could keep watching it the entire way. It didn't really look like it had much of a neck. It was about 50 yards away, so I wasn't really able to discern, what the facial features or anything looked like. I couldn't tell if it had ears or anything like that. I could tell it had black fur, and it was getting pretty dark, so, it could have been dark brown or some other color, but it appeared black to me. And, it was standing on 2 legs, it was standing upright, and I just wasn't sure what it was. And so we drove on past, and I was kind of a little bit shocked by the look of it. And I asked, "Hey, did you guys see that?" And my mother said, that she did. And I asked her, I said, "What kind of bear was that?" Because I'd never seen anything that large before. And, to me, the size of it would have been like a bull, like an Angus bull standing on its hind feet. It was very big. And so anyway, I asked her, and she said, "Well, it wasn't a bear." And so my grandmother, she was actually asleep, and my grandfather was sitting in the passenger front seat. And he said he didn't see it, but he had some experiences when he was younger, and we started describing what we saw, and my mother called it a wood booger, and he agreed that's what it sounded like it was, and I had never heard of such a thing before, and although I probably heard of Sasquatch, I didn't really think of that at the moment because I wasn't really into it at the time. And so anyway, we saw this driving home one evening from fishing along the road there in near Willow Springs, Missouri. And we didn't really talk about it a whole lot afterwards. We would have, it would come up in casual conversation from time to time, but it just wasn't something that even though it was strange, it just didn't dominate because it was such a quick sighting. I guess I could have misidentified it, but I don't think so because I don't think there's anything out there that tall. And so we just didn't really talk about it a whole lot. My mother's since passed away, so I don't have an opportunity to talk to her about it anymore. But that was something that happened that I found very strange, and it kind of made me reevaluate my whole outlook on things. And I started researching more, and I came to realize that I had probably seen a Sasquatch at that point after watching all the campy shows that the 80s produced about Bigfoot and reading about it and all that kind of stuff. Back then we didn't have the internet, and so we had to get our information from movies like the Boggy Creek Monster or whatever. And so that was the first kind of strange thing that happened. Later on, my mother remarried, and my stepfather, he was from Southeast Georgia. So that's how I ended up down here. And so in 1984, we moved from Missouri to Scriven County, Georgia, which is right on the border with South Carolina and southeast Georgia. And we lived there for about a year, and then we moved to Bullock County, which is just a neighboring county. And anyway, in 1989, I had just graduated high school, and my father, or stepfather, he was from Screven County, so he knew a lot of people there. We would go over there. He had permission to hunt on properties and some ponds that he had permission to fish in. So we traveled to Screven County quite a bit to hunt and fish. And lifelong hunter, and you know, I kind of was raised to be the same. And I've done a lot of deer hunting, spent a lot of time in the woods, deep woods, hunting and fishing, and taken well over 100 deer, because our deer season is quite liberal here. We get 2 bucks and 10 does, so, and 4 months to do it. So I spend a lot of time outdoors, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And I've never really had any kind of experiences except for this one that were what I would consider strange here in Georgia. And we were fishing along a small river called the Ageechee River, and we were at a private landing. Now, the private landing was just a dirt landing, boat landing, and the Ageechee River doesn't have a lot of public landings in this particular area. And it's a small river, and it's not really navigable because the trees fall across it. It's maybe only as wide as a 4-lane highway in most places. And it does have some private landings, and we were fishing at one. And even though it was a private landing, my father had permission to fish there. And there was another private landing a few hundred yards downriver from where we were fishing on the Bullock County side. The river flows between Bullock County and Screven County, but we were on the Screven County side. And we were basically had gone catfishing that day. We set up right at dusk, and we started fishing. We were the only ones there. It's a nice wide spot, which is also unusual because there's no national forests in this part of Georgia, but this is mostly small farms, and there are a lot of swampy, low-lying areas that aren't suitable for farming. So there is quite a bit of forest land, especially along the rivers. The rivers are just basically undeveloped because they're so low-lying, and there's tens of thousands of acres that run along the river here that just simply don't have any development other than an occasional fishing cabin or landing to put a boat in. And anyway, so we were fishing here, and we've been fishing for, I guess, probably a couple hours. And it was probably getting close to midnight at this point. It would have been June or July of 1989. And we had been fishing here and catching quite a few fish, so we were having quite a good time. My father always used a Coleman lantern, which is a gas lantern, and I had a battery powered lantern that I was using, and we were kind of set up a little bit apart from each other, but still fairly close. And catfishing in the river at night off of the bank. And across the river from us, roughly about midnight, all I can really describe it as is it sounded like a very loud, very breathy almost female scream. It sounded like really it was kind of in the middle of the river. It sounded that close, but it wouldn't have been able to be in the middle of the river. It was across the river on the Bullock County side somewhere. But it wasn't a really long, drawn-out scream. It was kind of a short scream. And it was something I've never heard before. And I looked over at my stepfather, and he kind of looked at me, and we both kind of asked each other if we knew what that was right there in that moment. We were like, what was that? And neither one of us really had heard anything like that before. I think bobcats kind of make a screaming sound, so maybe it was that, but I'm not 100% sure. It just was something I hadn't heard before. And if it had only been that, I probably just would have wrote it off as nothing else. But we continued fishing, and my stepfather, he did mention that he thought it might have been a panther, which did kind of make me a little bit nervous because we didn't have a firearm with us. But again, it was across the river, and so therefore we weren't overly worried about it. So we continued fishing, and I don't know, it was at least maybe a half an hour or so had gone by without hearing anything else. And so we're just sitting there, everything's quiet, just hear the noise of the river, and we're catching catfish. And we hear a huge slap on top of the water, like someone doing a giant belly flop. And I've heard that before. Beavers, when they slap their tail, they kind of make that noise. So immediately my mind went to beaver. And I'm sure my stepfather was probably thinking the same thing. And again, we probably would have wrote that off. But within a few minutes, we heard a crack, like a tree snapping in half, and then a big crash of a tree into the water. So either a large portion of the tree fell off, or a whole tree fell into the water. And I was like, did a tree just fall? And my stepfather was like, yeah, it sounds like it must have. And again, it's across the river from us, fairly close to us, but being it was a dark night, I don't think there was a moon, or if there was, it wasn't putting out a lot of light. So all we had was the lantern light, and we could only see, within the lantern light, and obviously couldn't see across the river. So these stranger than normal things were kind of happening. It wasn't scaring us away. We weren't frightened really at all, because when you're out in the woods, things happen, trees fall and different things, and been fishing a lot, and I've heard a few things that obviously were natural sounds. So at that point, we weren't really too worried about it, still catching fish, so we weren't planning on leaving anytime soon. And a few minutes after the tree, we started hearing large splashes in the water. And, if you were in Missouri, you would think maybe rocks were being thrown into the river. It was that kind of splash. And it was a pretty large splash, like it would have been a large rock. Now, there's no rocks along the rivers here in Georgia for the most part, at least not this part of the state, because it's just low-lying, muddy, swampy areas. Occasionally, if you have a high bank on the side of the river, you can have large pieces of the bank fall off, and it kind of makes a splashing sound. But it didn't sound the same as that. It sounded like something being hurled out further into the middle of the river. The only thing I can really think that it was maybe some large limbs or sticks or something being thrown out in the river, but it had to be pretty good sized ones, because it wasn't a small splash. It was a pretty good splash, and it was several of them, and it just kept happening, and it was across the river from us. And at this point, I was like, what's going on? And my stepfather was kind of starting to get upset. He says, I think somebody's trying to scare us off. So he kind of got really mad. He yelled, hey, leave us alone, and or something like that. I don't remember exactly what he yelled, but then he started cussing at whatever was across the river a little bit, and it just kept happening, not, like one after the other, but every few minutes you'd hear a big splash. And this went on for, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 10 splashes. I don't really know the exact number. And then we heard something that I definitely have never heard before. And keep in mind, as I said, we're sitting on the river. We're on the Scriven County side of the river, and this is happening on the Bullitt County side. And the river is about maybe a little wider than a 4-lane highway at this particular part of the river. And we hear something that sounds like a low growl, and it's really deep, because it kind of feels like it's in your chest, like almost like you can feel it as well as hear it. And I've never, like I said, hunted all my life, fished all my life. I'm over 50 years old. Never heard that before, never heard it since. And that did spook us a little bit, and we were like, I think it's time we probably should leave, because we caught several fish and something weird was going on, and we didn't really know what was going on. We couldn't see. We actually didn't bring any flashlights with us. We only had the lanterns. We didn't think we needed them. We could park fairly close to where we set up the fish and just use the lantern light. So we started packing up. We got the cooler together and the rods and reels and the fish and all that kind of stuff, and put it in the back of his truck. And he went back to get his lantern, which he'd set on an old milk crate right at the edge of the water. And essentially, he walked down there to pick it up and slipped and fell right into the river, knocked the lantern off. The lantern, milk crate, and him all went right into the river. And the river is probably about 3 foot deep or so right there, maybe 2. It wasn't terribly deep right there off the bank. We were on an outside bend, so it was a little deeper, but not too deep. And anyway, he just had a little trouble getting back out of the river, so I came over there and helped him back up. And right as I was helping him back up, we got another growl, same as before, real low, deep. You could kind of feel it as well as hear it. And but again, it sounded like it was coming from the river. So I mean, it didn't sound like it was coming from the left or right of us. It sounded like it was coming from the river. So it would have been across the river. And so anyway, he's like, "Well, I'm going to get my lantern before we go," and helped him back down there where he hadn't, so he wouldn't fall back in. And he felt around with his feet and found his lantern. I somehow found it. I still don't know how he did it because the rivers aren't clear here. They're just basically the color of mud. And but he found it, got it out of the river. We got him back up out of the river, and got everything loaded in the truck, and basically we left. And never saw anything. Only had sounds, but it was extremely strange because I fished a lot and fished catfish at night a lot, especially when I was younger. And I've heard some stuff, like I said, things like a high bank. The mud will fall off in the river and it'll kind of splash a little bit, but it doesn't make a large splashing sound. Heard trees fall and all that kind of stuff. All that could have been natural, but it was just the entire combination of everything, including the growls, that kind of made it a strange occurrence for us. And then the owner of the property, we never really went back. I don't think we really wanted to overly, but the owner of the property, as I said, it was a private boat landing, and not too long after we had fished that night, the owner of the property basically closed down the landing. He wouldn't let anyone but his immediate family go down there and fish. So don't know why he did that, but he did. So we never really got an opportunity to go back and fish there again. And essentially, that was the two weird things that have happened to me. Out in the woods or there in Missouri, driving home from fishing, which was in a kind of a rural area itself.
Okay, Darrell. Well, I really appreciate you for sharing your encounters and experiences with me. And it sounds like the property owner possibly shut the place down because there was something there. Maybe he experienced something as well.
Yeah, I have no idea. My stepfather knew him and I didn't, so I don't know if they ever talked about it or not. I just know that my stepfather told me that he put up a chain across the road and had basically closed it down to anyone but him and immediate family. And he did have a fishing cabin there. I don't know if someone maybe was vandalizing it or some other thing going on, but he certainly closed it down, so no one ever got the opportunity other than him and his family to fish there again.
Yeah, that is interesting. And whenever you encountered the creature by the chicken coop, was that close to water or was that far away from Knoblik Lake?
Well, it was closer to Willow Springs than Knoblik Lake. The trip was to Knoblik Lake, which is the only reason I talked about Knoblik Lake. There could have been water around. I just don't know the layout of the farm. It could have had a small pond or a stream somewhere nearby. But that area, that drive is so wooded. I mean, it is. If you pull it up on a Google map and you take a look at Knoblik Lake, you'll see that it's situated in, especially between Knoblik Lake and Willow Springs, it's almost completely forest. And then there are a few small farms and homes along the way. And it was at one of those. It would have been on the north side, I think, or the east or the west side. Either one. I'm not really sure. I guess it would have been the north side of the road that I saw the animal. And I don't know what it was. I'm not claiming for sure it was a Sasquatch, but I can't explain what else it would have been given its size.
Yeah, it sounds like a very large creature. And I've often heard reports where they're attracted to chickens, chicken coops, and I think that's a food source for them.
It very well could be. Certainly, chickens cooped up, foxes and bobcats and even possums will get in there and attack them. So, I mean, it's food in one place that can't really get away easily.
Yeah, very true. And how well could you see the creature?
Well, it was in the open, so it wasn't like behind any trees or anything. So I could see it pretty well from that perspective, but it was about 50 yards away. So it was hard for me to make out any real details of it. I could tell it looked black to me, and it was definitely tall. It towered over the chicken coop. Um, Again, I don't know exactly. I was pretty young still, roughly 10 years old. I don't know for sure how tall it was, but if I had to guess, it would have been probably 8 to 10 feet tall. I think a a black bear, at least the ones I've seen standing up, might be about 5 foot tall. So I would say a 10 foot is probably a good estimate, because I think it would have made two black bears standing on top of each other to make it that tall.
Yeah. And did you guys ever have any chickens go missing? Any chicken eggs, anything like that?
Well, it wasn't our farm, so no, I wouldn't have known. We were just driving by. Now, we've had chickens here in Georgia, and we have had some go missing, but I don't think it was necessarily Sasquatch. I'm pretty sure it was a fox or a chicken hawk got those, but I don't know. It's hard to say, because this is just a chance encounter. Wouldn't have even happened if I hadn't have got out there on that rock and had the snake come after me and kind of scared my mother into leaving early. It was just coincidence. Otherwise, we've been driving home at a different time and probably would have never seen it. There was a yard light. I do remember there was a yard light. I can't remember if it was attached. I think it was attached to the barn itself, or the shop. So there was a yard light out there, so maybe we would have still seen something. But it was right. It was right at dusk, but it wasn't dark enough that you couldn't make out the animal standing there.
Okay. So you guys were driving past the area, is that correct?
That's right. Yes, we were.
Okay.
It was. I don't remember, because I was pretty young again. I don't remember exactly how far outside of Willow Springs, but it was outside of town a little ways. It would have been closer to Willow Springs than Noblet Lake, so maybe 5 miles out of town or something like that.
Yeah, and Willow Springs isn't very big, and I imagine back then there weren't too many people. There's a lot of woods in the area, a lot of Mark Twain National Forest, and I think these creatures would certainly be in there.
Mm-hmm. I would certainly think there's plenty of food and plenty of habitat for them. If they're in the area. If it supports black bear, there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to support something like a Sasquatch.
Yeah, I would agree. And is there anything else you can think of that's happened in your life that you've experienced that might be Bigfoot? Anything paranormal, any UFO or alien experiences?
Well, nothing else that I would think might be Bigfoot. And like I said, on that second experience, I have no idea. I didn't see anything. It was all sounds. But as I said, I've been hunting and fishing since I was, 7 or 8 years old, and I've certainly never experienced anything like that. Um, I have seen some things. I really haven't seen anything else paranormal, Bigfoot related. I'm not going out looking for anything, and if I do hunt and fish, and I do spend a lot of time in the woods. So I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't had more experiences, to be honest. But these were the only two that I've ever really had that could have been like a Bigfoot type creature. I have seen in the sky a couple of strange things, and I don't really know what they were. One time, I was standing my mother's house. This is after I'd moved out. I'd come back to visit, and I was talking on my cell phone. And she had a patio, and I was standing on her patio outside her kitchen, and I was looking toward the northern sky, and I had noticed a really bright star. And I was sitting there looking, and I was like, I don't think I've ever seen that star before. It's so bright, it must be a planet. But I was talking on the phone while I was kind of looking at it. And a few seconds later, it shot straight up into outer space and was gone, like in the blink of an eye. It was stationary prior to that, and then it basically just shot out of sight. and it didn't go down, it went up. And I found that very strange, to be honest with you. No idea what it was, but that was certainly something that I've not seen before, and it was strange to me. The only other instance on Christmas morning, when my in-laws lived about 25 miles away from us, and we always went to their house for Christmas morning. And we were, and because all the grandkids gathered up there, they wanted to do everything right at daylight. We'd have to get over there pretty early. So we would leave before the sun came up. And we were loading up the car with the kids on Christmas morning to go over there. And this is before Starlink. My wife and I saw some strange formations of lights. And there were multiple formations, like 3 formations of maybe 5 lights each. And they were passing overhead, no sound. They appeared to be stars, except for they were in formation. And they were, of course, traveling across the sky, where a star appears stationary, even though it's not. So that was another strange occurrence. No idea what that was. I'm assuming it must have been satellite, but I don't know that. I've not seen anything like it before. If it was planes, they were very far apart, but still in formation, and very high because we couldn't hear anything. But I'm assuming it was satellites.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I've seen the same thing before. I witnessed this large glowing orb that kind of moved around the house, and it stayed stationary once it got to the front of the house, and it was radiating and turning into different colors. And then all of a sudden it shot up at an angle into space, like at warp speed, and just disappeared.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, this one wasn't that low to the ground. It was high up, like a star would have been, but it was a lot brighter, the one I saw off the patio. And it caught my attention only because I happened to go outside and was talking on the phone because I wanted to have a private conversation. And I was basically just standing there talking on the phone, looking at the sky. And it caught my attention because it was brighter than a normal star would be. And but it appeared stationary for a few seconds and then shot at incredible speed straight up and away. And I know for a fact that I've never seen that before, and I can't imagine what it was. UFO definitely, because it's certainly unidentified as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not saying it was alien or anything, but it was certainly strange.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Darrell, I think that pretty well covers most of your encounters and experiences. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
No, like I said, my grandfather had an experience when he was younger. He used to tell me a story about, but I don't know if you're interested to hear about that one. It's certainly something that didn't happen to me. It was only secondhand information.
Yeah, let's hear about it.
Well, he essentially, after this, seeing this animal, when we were driving back from Noblet Lake, and my mother and I were telling him what we saw, they were agreeing it was this wood booger, as they called it. And so he told us about when he was younger, during World War II. He had epilepsy, so he wasn't able to fight in the war. But he owned a sawmill, and it was a small sawmill operation. It was just him and his brother and a couple employees. And the way I understand it, they would go out from the sawmill. They had their own log trucks, and they would go out and they would pick up the logs and drive them back to the sawmill. And so he'd gone out to get a load of logs to bring back to the sawmill. And he said they were cutting like 1 million board feet of lumber a day for the Army, I think to make railroad ties, if I remember the story correctly. And so he'd gone out to get this load of logs, and his truck had broke down. And of course, he's on a logging road in the middle of nowhere, Missouri. It would have been in Douglas County because that's where he had the sawmill at, which, Noblet Lake itself is in Douglas County. But I'm not sure exactly what part of Douglas County. If he told me, I don't remember. But anyway, the truck had broke down, so he had to walk back to the sawmill to get help. And he's walking along the logging road, and he said one of these wood boogers, as he called it, essentially stepped out onto the logging road. In front of him, I don't know exactly how far away, but fairly far away, in that he saw it, could tell it what it was and all that, but it wasn't so close to him that it was right on top of him. And he said they just kind of stopped and went motionless, him and this animal, and they just kind of sized each other up, as he put it. And he stood there for a little bit, and he said he just kind of walked off on across the road and off to the side of the logging road and into the trees after looking at him for a minute or two. And he had a large, he called it his pig sticker. I still have it, as a matter of fact. It was a large case knife, a large 2-blade case knife. And he said he pulled that out of his pocket and opened it up because he said if it came after him, he was at least going to go down fighting. And he said he gave it a few minutes to leave, and he kind of kept walking that way. And he said this was during the daylight, so it wasn't like overnight or anything. And he said he walked past where it was at, and he said he heard something off in the trees, but never really saw it again. And he walked onto the sawmill. So again, it's another kind of a short encounter, but he was adamant that essentially what we saw is what he saw back in the 1940s while he was logging.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Did he describe what this creature looked like?
Well, he basically said it looked like what we described, which was tall and hairy and wide. And I'm pretty sure he told us that his looked kind of orangish brown. But the one I saw, to me, looked black. But at any rate, he saw it, from what I could gather, about the same distance that we saw this one, so about 50 yards maybe away. And he was walking along the logging road, so he would have been walking maybe where he wasn't making a lot of noise walking. So I think maybe it was just crossing and naturally, and they basically both startled each other because they didn't expect each other there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how many people have encountered these creatures and just never talk about it or don't know what to make of it.
Well, that's kind of me. I talked with my mother about our sighting there on the road a little bit here and there when it would come up. I've told my kids the story about the night on the river, mostly kind of a campfire kind of thing. But I've never told anyone outside my immediate family what I've seen until today, because I just didn't really feel like it was, if someone came up to me and said, well, I saw this, I would then chime in and say, yeah, I've seen something like that, and here's what I saw. But I didn't go out of my way to tell the story to anybody, not necessarily because I didn't think I was going to be believed, because it really doesn't matter to me whether I'm believed or not. It's just a situation where I don't feel like I have enough to contribute, because I've been listening to your show. I love listening to your show. I load my own ammunition for hunting and shooting, and I'll put it on in the background and listen to it while I'm making ammo for my rifles a lot. And so I love listening to it. You do a great job. But I listen to some of these stories, and they're very detailed, and they've had multiple encounters and stuff, and that's not me. I've had very short situations, so I never really felt like I needed to tell anybody about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's hard to talk anyone about it just because most people don't understand and they've never experienced anything. And, it's just kind of something that you keep balled up deep inside yourself. And whenever the opportunity arises, you share it with whoever's open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's certainly, today it's a lot more accepted than it was when I was younger. When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, I mean, most people said, "Oh, you're a kook if you've seen this thing," or "You say you've seen this thing," and that might be another reason. But I mean, today I think it's a lot more accepted than it was back then. But I mean, again, it's just kind of one of those things. I think something like your show and other shows like it, and even like the Finding Bigfoot show on television and stuff. Even though I watch the Finding Bigfoot show and I go, they're never going to find anything if they keep making that much noise, to be honest with you. But being a hunter, I would never make that much noise. But anyway, I guess they have their own theory as to how to do it. But anyway, I think all those type things, your show, television shows like that, will help bring it more into the mainstream so that people will talk about their experiences. And if there's something out there to find, it'll help us all be more aware and find it.
Yeah, absolutely. We may never figure out what it is, but there's more people speaking openly about it, and there's all kinds of shows now on YouTube and TV, and I think people are becoming more aware of the subject. Even if they don't believe, they're aware. So that way, if it happens to them or someone they know, they at least know what to make of it or what it could be.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. And what do you think these creatures are? Where do you think they came from?
Oh, I really don't know. I like to tell people I'm from the Show Me State because of the motto of Missouri, of course. So I only know what I've seen. I feel like what I did see was a flesh and blood animal. I don't know from there really what they are. I mean, I've listened to all the theories about Gigantopithecus and the missing link and alien pets and all that kind of stuff. And I know there's a lot of different theories out there, and I just really I don't want to say because I don't know. I'm more of a wait and see what they are kind of attitude about it. So I'm kind of open to them being anything as long as it's not too outlandish. But I do believe, the one thing I do believe because of what I've seen is that they are a flesh and blood animal of some kind.
Yeah, absolutely. They are flesh and blood, and I truly believe they're living out there in the woods, but also my mind wants to teeter to, like the other theories that they're part of the giants, the Nephilim, maybe they're alien, because people are seeing these things in the sky. So, it could be something to do with that. A lot of people claim maybe they're interdimensional, but no matter what, they are flesh and blood. They are out there in the woods, and they are real.
Yeah, so again, I would need to see something that connects them. I personally haven't seen anything that connects them to an alien or something like that. But just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not true. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of like, well, this is what I've seen, so this is where I'm at. But if proof is provided, then I would certainly not say no, they can't be that if there's proof of it.
Yeah, absolutely. People can come up with all kinds of theories, but at the end of the day, they're an unknown creature, species living out there in the woods, stealing chickens, chicken eggs, picking up fish from the river, things like that. So no matter what, they're out there.
All right. Well, Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Darrell. It was a pleasure to have you on the show, and you were an excellent guest, and I really do appreciate you speaking up openly about your encounters.
All right. Well, you have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Take care, my friend. Bye. All right, Darrell, thank you once again for sharing your Bigfoot encounter with me here on Sasquatch Theory, and it certainly was an interesting one. A lot of people talk about having Bigfoot encounters or experiences near chicken coops, and for some reason these things are attracted to the chickens, and it's an easy meal for them. I've honestly thought about getting chickens for that very reason. I eat eggs every morning, so I think that'll be beneficial for myself and for experiencing more Sasquatch activity. But it's hard to say. Think about how many people have chicken coops and have never had any strange experiences. But I think a lot of people who have had chickens in the past have just had mysterious things take their chickens or get into the coop, and it's really hard to say. But this is an answer as to what possibly could be going on. They like turkey, grouse, ducks, and many other bird species, and I think there's a lot of protein there, so these things are attracted to the chickens. I'm sure you thought about this encounter for a long time, and I thought it was really cool that your mom and your family called them wood boogers. You hear that term a lot, wood boogers, and to me, that means something that's messing with you, and these things are out in the forest, so that's a perfect term for these creatures. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you have a Bigfoot encounter you would like to share, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com, and if you guys can, support the channel in any way possible. Thank you everyone for listening. Take care and be safe out there.